Hello, welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer here at Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been talking about the technology, business, and politics of APIs since 2010. This is our weekly podcast where we sit down with interesting folks doing interesting things when it comes to APIs, integrations, agents, and all that good stuff. Today, we dive into the spec-driven development aspect of what we're all up to, and we had a conversation with Tony Tam, who was the creator of Swagger, which is now also known as OpenAPI since it got put into the Linux Foundation. And alongside the other specs that I've been talking to, from Anil Dash and Markdown to Fran Mendez and Async API, I sat down with Tony and I wanted to get a little bit about the history of Swagger and OpenAPI as he saw it.
Like my personal history was I was in the waddle space way back, like with writing soap envelopes and that sort of thing. And the and this was like with Microsoft Visual Studio, what was it called before? Code. I can't even remember what it was called back then. But like I saw the value of auto-generated clients back then, and I'm like, this is cool. I mean, the code was horrible. The code generation was awful, but it worked, and I liked it. I didn't have to look at it, and I just knew that it would work. And that was way back, like in the late '90s, which explains the gray hair and my age and that sort of thing. But I really got into REST APIs at Wordnik, which I started there in 2008, and we had some smart guys there, and they were writing REST APIs for the front end to talk to with PHP and Kahana framework and all these old things that I think are long gone. And uh, we redid things into Java, and we started having like high performance APIs, and um, we were doing okay as a company. And at the time, our CEO was like, hey, let's figure out how to make some money. Let's make these APIs available to other customers. And we thought that's cool. But they wanted clients in like Python and PHP and JavaScript and that sort of thing. And then they wanted all this documentation. And it's like, we've got like six guys working here, six people, sorry. And we just couldn't do it. We couldn't build all these different language clients. We couldn't keep up with the documentation because there were special cases in it and that sort of thing. And like literally at like 3 in the morning, I still have the email. I sent an email to one of my other engineers, a really smart guy named Ayush. I said, "Hey, what if we made an endpoint in our API that just would return some description of it, and then you could like figure out what it, like we could generate documentation and clients and stuff like that." And I still have the email. I think I even printed it out, which also shows how old I am. And that was kind of the basis of self-describing. So he said, "Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if the code generated that description?" I said, "Yeah, like so. Let's bang something out." So you banged out some Java code that kind of introspected and start up and return this thing, and then. This other fellow who was really smart. So that was the beginning of Swagger, right? It was basically a late night desperation of how do we make all these different clients and documentation for our API for customers. And then a really smart guy, a great designer, a really just fun guy, Zeke Sikelianos. I couldn't spell his name if he asked me to, but he's still in software space. He built a front end on top of that, and we didn't know what to name it. And we were at Apigee with Marsh, Gardner, and Zeke was like, "Hey, why waddle when you can swagger?" And that's when the name came out of it. And so the idea didn't come from, hey, like let's describe these APIs so that everyone can understand them. It was really just completely selfish. It just said, I can't keep up with changes in the APIs, writing clients, writing documentation, and we've got to find a solution to it. So the desperation is what started it. And then once we started that, we were like, oh, shoot, we can do all kinds of neat stuff, right? Like we can write a generalized code generator. We can put in minimum and maximum values. Like this is before JSON schema existed, or maybe I didn't even know about JSON schema because I was just trying to make things work at the time. So we got more sophisticated, and then our documentation person was like, "Hey, this is great. Like you can put some text in here and some links, and wouldn't it be great if like that whole thing just built and built and built?" And then somebody said, "Why don't we open source it?" I was like, "Sure, why not? Like let's open source this framework, open source the UI." And started an IRC channel and had it open during the day just to see what would happen. Someone would show up, write some Shakespeare, like just nonsense, right? Like just nothing. And then maybe like 6 months in, maybe 8 months in, somebody showed up and said, "Hey, just want you to know that we just rolled out Swagger across our whole like commerce platform, and we're pushing like $2 billion worth of like transactions through it every day. Have a nice day." And then they just left. I was like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Like what is this? And then we find out that like it got posted on some website. Somebody wrote some article and said, "Hey, this is a great way to visualize your APIs and document them." And I thought, wow, I mean, that's cool. Like I don't know what to do with it, but um it sounded good. And then more people would show up in the channel, and Ron Rotofsky got some convinced somebody to give us swagger.io as a domain name. And we just kind of started building out the tool set and evolving it to three different things, like a code generator, a UI, and then libraries that helped you create it. And I can't remember who it was. It might have been you, might have been Marsh, might have been Ed. I don't remember. But we realized that the whole thing was backwards. That like generating code or having code generate this description really was a terrible workflow, because we get the documentation people hooked on it, and then they want to like change our code, and we're like, don't touch the code, because then they change the code to change some string and break something, or this flow just felt backwards. And we said, look, we can turn this code generator around and make servers. And when you could make servers, then like now you could just stand stuff up really fast. And then the servers got more sophisticated. It was Ed. I'm sorry. I said I don't remember. Now I remember. Ed enough. I think he was at Apigee at the time. I think he went to Databricks. But he said, "Hey, let's make it so that the the spec is the DSL for the server." And so you write the spec, and then it would wire to the server. It was the exact opposite of what we originally thought, and that just made sense. And so we went and built a bunch of tooling around this spec first. You write the spec, that is the server, like that does everything. And then a whole series of workflows came out of that were like really fascinating. Like we saw them in banks, we saw them used across like e-commerce, just tons of different systems that were following that model. And that's, I think, you and I got introduced around then, maybe a little before then. And so like that was kind of the genesis of it. There was, later we, of course, that was Swagger 2. Swagger 1 was pretty awful. Swagger 2 got better. And then a bunch of smarter folks, you included, convinced us to start looking at more standard things like JSON schema, and that got rolled into Swagger 3, which became part of Linux Foundation, and renamed OpenAPI, which was really, I think, the pivotal moment for the initiative, that it became, you know, it had enough girth behind it that the industry was like, yeah, this is safe to use. It's not some random startup that's going to go out of business or charge you 10 cents a download, right? It's a real thing now, and all kinds of companies started coming out. We got partnerships with Google. We got the other description formats started adopting this as the standard, pretending, acknowledging that we existed. There were some spirited debates. Some people got really mad.
Definitely a lot of spirited debates. I was definitely part of that, giving Tony a hard time when it came to a lot of how things played out. But it was an exciting time. It was, I would say, equally as exciting as what's gone on with MCP and skills. It was just at a different scale, I would say, than it is now. The hype cycle is much bigger now. But it was a big deal back in the day when Swagger, OpenAPI, and kind of how it transformed and changed how we integrate. But I wanted to understand from Tony, like, how does he see the in this moment, in this AI moment, what's the relationship between OpenAPI and what's going on with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, the thing that was, I saw, there were two moments where I was like, oh wow, this is really going to help with AI. And it was before we weren't even calling it AI at the time. I probably should have. There was a demo that I saw. I think you were there at one of these conferences with Watson, and there's a fellow, like, he opened an open API doc in Watson and ordered a pizza, and it was able to kind of guide him through all the stuff. I saw that as like, wow, machines really can. It's not just machines reading it for simple things. It's interpreting the intent of the document and the intent of the APIs and turning those into like actions that you can make as a human. I thought that was amazing. The second big thing was Greg Brockman, who was Stripe's third founder, then went to um, he's president of OpenAI now. He showed me in like 2018. He said, "Look, I've got this adapter. It reads this OpenAPI spec, and it can like respond to all this AI stuff." And I was like, "Ah, this AI stuff's never going to work." And then later, that became like part of their plugin infrastructure. And then I was like, "Oh wow, if you have a Swagger doc or an OpenAPI doc describing your API, you now are in the API, the AI infrastructure, right? Like, it could just basically, as long as it knows how to authenticate with you, which it can do automatically from the doc, you are now part of that system." And I knew that somebody would come up with a new structure, um, but at that point, I don't. It's hard for me to say if AI was where it is now and there was no open API. I don't know if it would matter as much having all these different specs or spec formats. I don't know that it would matter the same way, right? Because you don't have, it's like the computer's interpreting it, and it might be hard to write, a blueprint, or RAML might be hard to write, but you don't care anymore. It's just a computer. It has no feelings, right?
I like that. I mean, yeah, AI doesn't have any feelings, but I do find myself sometimes thinking it, apologizing, worried I'm treating it too badly. So I do apply some of those human characteristics sometimes. But I wanted to ask, Tony directly, like, is there any AI without API? You hear that's Kong's statement, but I think there's something to it. It's the foundational layer. So I wanted to hear from Tony what he thought about. Is there any this AI without the foundation that we laid with APIs?
I think that none of the AI world that we're seeing now could happen without APIs, period. And you could argue that, like, at the limit, the web page is the API, and that web pages are for robots and not for humans anymore. I mean, half of them are generated by robots. Um, but uh, I still think that structure and contracts give even the smartest AIs the best chance at doing a good job. And I don't think that I'm surprised that the one thing I'm really surprised about is that they didn't turn into some kind of more efficient like binary protocol. But I guess it doesn't. It may not matter in the end. It just was like, look, this was made by humans, right? This is artisanal software, and look, you can read it. If you created agent like A2A and these other, if you come up with some of these binary, like agent protocols, then if that happened, if this all happened now, it probably wouldn't be very friendly to humans. It would
Yeah.
just be some blob of binary that we would look at and say, I'm glad something can understand this, right? So
Well,
we're lucky. It's kind of like we got to be in the craft part of computers, right?
we are lucky, and I'm thankful for having to join Tony for this journey and been part of this experience. I do feel very thankful we were part of this craft period. But I wanted to ask Tony, like, does he see OpenAPI going away because of what we're doing with AI? Is it gonna just fade into the background and disappear?
we can both we can both agree if it becomes irrelevant, then maybe we need to step away. I even so after I left SmartBear, and I ended up at big company, I was kind of like, look, I'm ready for something new, right? I want to try something different. I've talked about APIs for literally for 10 years, and I'm just ready to, but you can't get away from it. Want to or not, it's like computers need to talk to computers, and people make the same stupid mistakes without it. And I was just flabbergasted to see it's just more of the same at big scale and slower, right? And so like I have spent a lot of time, and the company is actually there are a bunch of passionate people who got behind and released a bunch of like ones for Swift, and internally we're using it, and people see the value, and the documentation, the payment stuff goes through it. We publish it. It's pretty fascinating. There's still a lot of, there's a lot of protobuf and Google stuff that floating around that I think it's a lot sloppier than, I think it's messy. I don't love it, but I get it. You hire people from Google and they're going to bring Google technologies, but I don't see it changing for a long time. I don't see it.
I agree 100%. I still see SOAP in a lot of organizations. And when I do governance in a lot of large enterprise, I still see 50% Swagger 2.0. And we're a good decade past that. So things don't change as fast as people feel when it comes to these specs. And once something gets baked in and there's tooling, it takes a long time to pull those things out. So I don't think OpenAPI is going away. I agree that it's foundational. It's why AI can do a lot of what it does. And there's still a lot more OpenAPI work to be done to align teams. I'm having conversations with groups who are still dependent on it to align teams and get them heading in the same direction. So it's important, but there will definitely be new specs to continue coming out. The landscape will continue shifting, and I think definitely Swagger and OpenAPI's day has already come, and but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. All right, another interesting one. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hey, one last bit before you go. Talk about my Naftiko signals work again. Just hit the Q1 end of this research that I started back January 1 and been talking about throughout these episodes. But just to recap, I pulled the job postings and blog posts and press releases for 250 plus enterprise, mainstream enterprises across about 70 different industries and business sectors. And I wanted to see what they were investing in, the different areas they're investing, the services, standards, and tooling. And then I wanted to size this up against what we've been seeing, the different waves of AI that have been crashing on the shore of enterprises. So I got the Q1 kind of finalized, the site, the data, the research. You can head there, have an AI impact report. I have a radar, And I have a lot of interesting data behind it that I'm willing to share with folks who become our design or service partners. So head over to signals.navtico.io for more information. And then feel free to fill out any of the forms, reach out to me on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, and you're welcome to just email me, kinlane@navtico.io, for more information. All right. I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for coming by, and we'll see you at the next episode. Cheers.